Welcome to the Barcelona Podcast, episode 154. And this opinion is brought to you by the most influential voices in the FC Barcelona community. I'm Dan Hilton, and first things first, as much as Neymar has since dominated the headlines, the week started with a debut for 16-year-old Ansu Fati. With the young winger's first appearance for the first team, I couldn't think of anyone better to talk about it with than with my friend Navid Molaaghaei. Here's that quick conversation. I'm joined now by friend of the podcast, Navid Molaaghaei. You know who it is. He's an expert on all things La Masia, all things youth football. And Navid, it is a merging of worlds because a guy that you have covered for a long time in Ansu Fati has made his first team debut. So we are bringing you on today to talk about that. Navid, how are you doing? And with the exception of just talking about Ansu Fati's debut.
I'm doing pretty well, especially because of Ansu. I slept very well last night, so that's nice.
Well, you're going to help us today talk a little bit about his story. Now, Ansu Fati and his older brother, Brahimi, who, again, fans of, or people who pay attention ardently to La Masia, would have known the name Brahimi Fati because he has been with his brother Ansu in La Masia since 2012 when they together came over from Sevilla's youth system. How do you think, and he is the older brother, Brahimi, he's 21 at the moment, on loan in the third division from Barcelona B. How do you think his brother's story has shaped Ansu's? I mean, if you look at through the scope of the fact that Brahimi was really the one discovered by Sevilla, and then in the one discovered by Barcelona as well, and Ansu has been the younger brother, you think that's been beneficial to him?
Yeah, absolutely, I think so. His name is Brahima. Sorry, but Brahima, he's definitely been a guide, a very nice guide for Ansu, and now I'm pretty sure he was active in the contract negotiations as well with the club throughout the summer, and I'm sure that he's been a big help to his baby brother as they progressed through the academy. Brahima was actually a teammate of Calves Aleñas and Calves Perez. And now he was a nice talent, but like when he reached the juvenil stages, he just couldn't reach the other players. But yeah, it's very nice that he's been a nice factor for Ansu as he's grown up. He's been a massive help to him, especially through Ansu's hard times at the academy at some point. He's been a good help. It's great.
Well, you mentioned that contract extension, and both Fati and fellow Juvenil A and one of his friends, Ilaix Moriba, they had their huge renewals done now. Moriba right around his 16th birthday, and Fati just now over the summer. It seems like a vote of confidence for those two after we looked at all those different talents that you and I have discussed on previous shows. With all the exodus of talent, if you will. This seems the club, for all these young players playing hardball with money, they were willing to play Fati and Moriba, and it seems like there is with the club, a vote of confidence with these two in particular.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's just great that they both stayed, and they've both been very, very, very great throughout the preseason, especially. I know, of course, Ansu, of course, it's been great. He did very nice with Barca B. Ansu scored 2 goals, scored more goals, actually, and scored some goals for Ronda as well. But Ilaix has been pretty scary for Victor Valdez's Juvenil A. So they've both been, how can you say it? Like they both done well after they renewed, and Ilaix makes significantly more still than Ansu, despite both of them getting pretty good contracts. But yeah, it's very nice for both of them to have stayed after the mass exodus in the past couple of years. There are also some other great talents coming through. So yeah, we'll be just fine, I think.
And that should excite Culés even more that, we saw 16-year-old Ansu Fati make his first team debut, and he's not the one that is paid the most. That's a guy that I think we have a little bit longer to wait just because of the center midfield depth for Barcelona. But let's go all the way back to the beginning. We hinted at him a little bit that Ansu Fati, when he showed up in 2012, he, instead of going right to the Alavin Bay, like he has always basically done in the La Masia system, he has gone up an age group and played with those a little bit older than him, including, as what was circulating on social media, people might have seen, he and Takefusa Kubo, those pictures have been making the rounds from their Alavin A days. That was Ansu's first year at the club and the first of the years, again, that he played with in an age group higher than his own. At the time, though, Navid, if I'm not mistaken, he was a central and attacking midfielder there, right? I mean, at that point, did we already know then that he had a little something special, or did we have to wait until his position changed a little farther up the field?
No, he was absolutely something special back then as well. The only thing about him was that he was clearly physically much more superior to his opponents and teammates, actually, even despite him playing against older kids. But even despite that physical advantage, he was still technically brilliant. We have one kid in the academy right now who is a bit in a similar position. Who is of course very physically superior, but at the same time, like the technique that he shows and that Ansu shown back then, also like that it was pretty clear that he had something else in him other than just physique, and we're seeing that now. Of course, it's pretty impressive that a 16-year-old can just bully La Liga defenders, which Ansu did yesterday, also physically. But technically, he's just on a different level, Ansu, actually, and he hasn't just taken advantage of his physical strength back in the academy days. He was also just technically superior, and we did quickly find out. I mean, attacking midfielder. I wrote in that article attacking midfielder, and maybe I should have just written like false nine. But he did actually, because he didn't play as an interior. He was actually an attacker, and he was quickly moved to. He did actually just play everything, like, but mostly going through the left side of the pitch. Even when he was playing false nine, I remember in the 15-16 season, they were experimenting him as an interior, as a central midfielder, where I remember some insane assists from him. But yeah, he's been a left wing throughout all like the last few years. I think the first Juvenil A game last season he played at right wing. I mean, even back then he was like a joker because the season had just started and he was 15 still, and he was playing against 19-year-olds. But he was still just dominating, and of course I would never have expected him to make his first team debut and now train regularly and impress in first team training as well. So his progression has been quite ridiculous, and even Take Kubo, Take was outscoring Ansu. Like they were just competing with each other back then at Alvina. Like one would score 2 goals in a match and the other one would score like four. So it's been pretty fun to follow Ansu, actually.
And earlier in your question, you mentioned that there is a comparison now coming through La Masia, and instead of comparing Ansu Fati upward, I actually want to ask for the name that you're comparing downward.
His name is Landry Faré. He's not similar to Ansu at all in terms of like position and stuff. He's a center back, but he's just. I mean, he's 2-footed and like far better than everyone else technically, except for maybe one or two players. But he's scary. Like they even play him at wing at left wing at left back left wing in the 7-a-side because he's just a cheat code actually. So he's also going to be playing with older kids this season a lot. So we'll see where he ends up.
Well, you mentioned 2015, and that's. When you talk about Ansu Fati, I think not just coming from Guinea-Bissau, where he was born, coming to Spain, to the Seville region, where he gets integrated with his brother to the Sevilla system, but the different steps that his career has taken, even as a footballer, where in 2015 he has to deal with the FIFA ban. Now, obviously, Kubo dealt with that with much more ferocity, but Ansu Fati dealing with it a little bit in terms of just the fear of potentially getting kicked out of the club, and then also suffering that terrible fibula injury that could have derailed his career. And as far as those different pieces of adversity, Navid, why didn't they derail his career in the way they did so many other players, you think?
Quite simply, like just talent and of course hard work as well. As you said, the fibula, and there was also another bone that broke in his leg, and like he was out for an entire season, and he returned like straight to the squad, like the squad that he was playing with older kids, and he missed an entire year out with injuries, and he just returned as if nothing had ever happened. And thank God that he recovered well. Like when you break your leg at that age, the bones recover better than when you're older. Like, right. Of course, I'm not a doctor, but yeah. So thankfully he returned, and he just returned, and like, yeah, he didn't. He just continued to do the stuff that he does, and he's a very humble kid. Yesterday, 16 years old, debuted with the first team, impressed with the first team, now training regularly with the first team. He just posted on Instagram today that like he's grateful to everyone, and that he'll continue to work hard and keep his feet on the ground and stuff like that. He is just a great kid. He's coming from a great family. The Fati family is really great. He has a baby brother that he takes to the FCB Escola and sees him play a lot. And like he's just such a good kid. Like and I just wish him so many good things. And he fortunately did not have any problems. He didn't have. I think he was temporarily suspended just for safety reasons by the club while they were. I don't know what they were like.
Right. Yeah, that's what I read
with
too.
FIFA and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I read. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So thankfully he wasn't hit by the sanctions as Takefuso and Lee Sung-woo and other great talents. But yeah, thankfully he just continued to dominate. And I'm not even sure if like where he would have been right now if he didn't got injured for a year. Maybe he would have been debuting with the first team last season or something. I don't even know. It's just scary to think about.
Right. I mean, being the second youngest official, and we say official because the YouTube video coming out this week is all about the youngest in Barcelona's history. But Ansu Fati is the reason for making this kind of content and bringing Navid on the show. But I think we're going to look ahead now to the future, Navid. We saw that Ansu Fati, yes, he is a winger, and you mentioned on that left side he was really dominant. But even in that game against Real Betis, we were seeing him pop up on the right. We were seeing him pop up in the middle. Where do you think his long-term best position is going to be? Is it going to be a winger? Is it going to be a striker? Could it be on? Do you think it's going to be on the left side?
Like for now, I think everything depends on Barca getting Neymar or not, because that left wing is going to be occupied, and I think Ansu has potential to go through the middle and play in an advanced role in the attack, like in a free role. I mean, we're seeing clips of him in first team training and the first team YouTube channel videos where he's just playing as a joker in the middle. A joker being like the one who's playing with the team in possession, just has a free role in the middle of the pitch, and he's just dominating. It's very it's very surreal to see, actually. And I think he has the potential to go through the middle. He played as a 9 for Barca B in some friendlies for Barca B. He played at a winger in some friendlies for a right winger in a friendly for Barca B, and left winger in a friendly for Barca B. Last season he only played at left wing and that one right wing match that I mentioned at Juvenil A. But the coach Denis Silva, he had some strikers, and he had Alejandro Marquez who played at 9 all season. So Ansu did play at left wing, sometimes a bit isolated, I think, because he has so much potential to go through the middle. He's a very hybrid attacker, as I mentioned. Like when he was experimenting as a central midfielder in 2015, he was also great. Like he has playmaking abilities for sure. He almost made 20 plus assists last season, as well as scoring 28 goals or something. So his potential is quite incredible. He's already a very rounded player. It's very cool to see. And with Victor Valdés has been experimenting some stuff. Like Conrad de la Fuente is playing left wing a lot for Junele in Ansu's absence, and Victor and Valdés is like making his wingers play as almost as central midfielders. And I think Ansu would also be perfect in such a role. I mean, he can play everything in attack. I think he's also not small and scored some nice headers last season as well. I can't even imagine where he'll be in some years. Not that I'm not saying like, oh, he'll be whatever, but like potentially he can go. I mean, he can move a lot potentially. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure like his biggest weakness either at the moment. Thankfully, there are people who know more who can tell those things and help him to improve.
Right.
But he's kind of scary actually.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we're not going to get into you and I discussing what it is about overhyping players or putting too much stock in a player's future. But again, what we can go on is the facts here that there's a 16-year-old kid for Barcelona who debuted for the first team, has yet to make his debut for Barcelona B as well. And you mentioned his manager this season being Victor Valdez. And again, Navid, we unfortunately don't have time for you to talk about what the big idea, the big picture of Victor Valdez coming to Juvenil means, but in the lens of Ansu Fati playing for Victor Valdez alongside, again, his friend Mariba, and even the West Brom transfer in Louis Barry. With that crew that Victor Valdez has, when we talk about his different coaches being Fati, do you see him playing a larger role for Francisco Pimienta's Barcelona B even this season, where we saw him a lot in preseason? Obviously, yes, he'll be on the peripheral now of the first team when they have all these major injuries, and you mentioned Neymar being a big part of that. But as far as what kind of time you think he could split between Barcelona B and Juvenil Oz with Victor Valdez, how do you think the club is going to negotiate his season?
I think I actually thought about it yesterday because yesterday Barca B also played, and their starting lineup in attack was Abel Ruiz at left wing, Alejandro Marquez at striker, and Alex Collado at right wing. And they also have the new signing Hiroki Abe from Japan, who hasn't been registered yet. He will be registered in a month or something. There's some bureaucratic issues, and of course there's also Carlos Perez, whom I think for now he's closer to the first team because he's almost 5 years older than Ansu, which is a bit insane actually, and he's also he also did very well yesterday. I almost feel a bit bad for Carlos Perez. Because he was so fantastic, and then Ansu comes in and steals the picture in 15 minutes. But no, I think he should play regularly for Barca B. He just needs to be tested against like on higher level for seniors. It would almost be a bit of a shame to see him play for Juvenil A. Maybe he will play a bit for them. I think and I hope that he'll play for Barca B. Alejandro Marquez was not impressive at all at 9. Maybe Ansu will slot in the lineup when Messi, Suarez and Dembélé return. Maybe he'll. I don't know. Maybe as I said, like it's so difficult to predict right now what's going to happen with him because he's a bit of a bombshell. At the moment in the club, and we'll see what happens. I just hope that he'll. I mean, of course, he's good enough to play for Barca B, so I hope that he'll play for them.
Well, wherever Ansu Fati is this season, we hope that you'll be following Navid on Twitter. We'll have that. Just click on his name down in the description, where you can, again, follow him on all updates, not just Ansu Fati, but a lot about La Masia, conversations there for him over on Twitter. And we will obviously be continuing to track, again, an exciting thing, this Ansu Fati debuting as the second youngest teenager for Barcelona ever. And we're going to have a YouTube video on that later. But this will wrap up this show with Navid. Navid, thanks so much for joining me today.
You're welcome, Dan.
All right, we'll be back after a break. Now to help me with listener questions is another friend of the podcast, Mike Miller. Mike, I heard you yesterday were wishing Bojan Krkic a happy birthday at the Montreal Impact game. How was that?
It was great, actually. He had a great game, and he's adapting extremely well with the Montreal Impact right now. And after only 3 appearances with the club, he already has a very, very important role on that squad, and he's already scored a goal, and he's basically their playmaker now. Like most balls are going through him, so it's very fun to watch, and you can see that quality and that La Masia training, whenever you see him touch the ball, his football IQ is exactly what it was when we last saw him. Unfortunately, illness and injuries did a number on his career for a few years, but I'm glad to see him doing well in the MLS, and especially in my hometown of Montreal.
Yeah, I mean, you know that this is now multiple times on this podcast that I've been plugging this week's YouTube video, which is all about the youngest debuts that's inspired by Ansu Fati last weekend, the youngest debuts in Barcelona history, and Bojan, of course, is on that list in the top 10. I'm not going to tell you where he is in the top 10. You got to watch the video. So go on the Barcelona Podcast YouTube channel, and you can find it there. And now, Mike, I have to, unfortunately, pivot just in a pretty negative direction here. We do just want to quickly mention on the show as well that we give plenty of prayers and support to the family of Luis Enrique, obviously former Barcelona manager, what would be current Spanish national team manager, but his daughter passed away. So again, not much to say about that, obviously, but just hope that they can find the peace that they need in the trying times that the family has ahead, of course. And I hope that Luis Enrique and his family can just find the love and support of the millions of people that, again, hope for just goodness to happen with that family.
Yeah, and if I may, I would like to encourage all of your listeners and followers to make a donation to your local child cancer research charity. If you can afford to do it, it's a very, very important cause, and it's taken away the lives of so many children around the world. And this one is very close to our hearts, but unfortunately, these tragedies happen every single day around the world, and we need to keep all of these people in our thoughts and try to make a difference if we can afford to do so.
Yeah, for sure. Very well said, Mike. And so it's difficult to pivot again after something like that, but we have to talk now about the news from today, and that is that Barcelona has been drawn into the group of death for the UEFA Champions League. And this is the Barcelona Podcast. That's why you're tuning in. But I think that neutrals have also said that it's a group of death because it has Borussia Dortmund, Inter Milan, Barcelona, and from the Czech capital of Prague, it's Slavia Prague. And there is a funny GIF going around on the face of the delegation, the faces, should I say, of the delegation from Slavia Prague, that they kind of had to give a tongue-in-cheek smile when they found out exactly what their full group was. And the reason this is called a group of death, and we will preview this later, so again, I don't want to waste too much time. You're just going to get a quick thought from Mike. My initial reaction here is that the reason it is a group of death is because Dortmund and Inter Milan are going to be two teams that are fighting and trying, and I think really this year they have the best chance, either team, in about 5 years or so of pushing the perennial powerhouses in Bayern Munich and Juventus in their respective leagues. So Barcelona is the La Liga favorite who's getting pushed by Atletico and Real Madrid this season, or maybe somebody else, and then Dortmund and Inter are the ones who could make title races of their respective leagues. So I think it's just a matter of, Barcelona being the favorite both in this group and the Liga, as opposed to the two in Dortmund and Inter. I would like to see, with all the reinforcements that both teams those brought in, Inter being Alexis Sanchez and Romelu Lukaku, and then Dortmund not only bringing in Paco Alcácer they had last year, but reinforcing with Julian Brandt from Bayer Leverkusen and Thorgan Hazard just in the attack, and then bringing in Mats Hummels, who returns to the club as well, back in defense. So both Inter and Dortmund have reinforced and are better than they were a year ago. So that is why both those teams are expected to be competing for their league championships. And so I'm wondering how they're going to navigate their much deeper squads now across both and, we'll say all three competitions for them.
The interesting thing about this group of death is that we could finish anywhere between the first and the third position. And with everything that you just said regarding Dortmund, Inter, Atletico, and Real Madrid, we're going to have to be so focused at all times. We're not going to be able to take any steps back. We're not going to be able to rest players the way we would want to, especially with the injuries that Messi and Suarez have been nursing. My biggest nightmare after looking at this draw is obviously to see us playing on Thursday nights from February to May, and it's a very tangible possibility. And as a joke within my own group there, in Montreal, we were joking about how Barca has never won the Europa League, and this might be the year. I hope not anyway, but all jokes aside, I think that we have enough depth to be able to finish at least in the top 2 in our group, and to maintain, if not a lead in La Liga, at least to be fighting for it until the very end. The only thing is we can't afford more injuries for now, and as much as we seem to be relying on Antoine Griezmann right now, things happen very, very fast in the world of football, and let's just hope that all our chips fall back into place, and that when everybody gets back into the action, everybody's healthy again, that we're going to be able to get the results that we need in order to qualify for the round of 16, as well as stay on top of the table in La Liga.
Yeah, I mean, both La Liga and Champions League, when we break it down, we don't think of it, and we almost take for granted the fact that La Liga has been done and dusted now for a few seasons in Barca's favor quite early. And so really the focus has completely become upon the Champions League over the last few seasons. And I think for better or worse, it's wound up being worse as far as the narrative goes because of the focus that then, as in the league, almost gets taken for granted. And I think for the betterment of even the fan base, and I was thinking about this more of even the club in winning, but what's best for the fan base to find some kind of solace and to almost fall back in love with the team. And I'm not just talking about on the field, I'm talking about off the field when we're thinking about results and championships. And again, it's not about just talking about what Ernesto Valverde does on the field. I'm talking about even off the field. And I think a close title race for Barcelona, I would hope, would galvanize the best out of everybody, and just this, once again, understanding that things have to be fought for. And one of those things we talked about in depth as we hit our listener questions now from Benno, who asked, if we get Neymar, who of the big earners is going to leave this year or next year? I added this year because we don't exactly know who might even be in that finalized deal. And by the time this is in your ears, maybe Neymar's on his way back and half the club is gone. But he says due to the fact that the wage bill will be too big for the current revenue. And Mike, I'm going to need to have a money person on the podcast, but my biggest thing is I don't know how much money Barca has. I don't know where the money's going to. When you think about the Camp Nou stadium renovation that's being put off, you think about how the installments of money need to be paid to Neymar will come out of the bank account. And then exactly who is going to be paying for it with what sponsorships and all these different things. We have no idea about the true finances of Barcelona and what goes on there. But I don't know, should we be worrying about the wage bill, or should we do what PSG and Man City have done the last few seasons and say, we'll figure it out? I mean, or they'll have to figure it out. It's not our problem.
Well, the difference between us and City and PSG is that these two clubs are literally city-states, right? They're funded by entire states, so we will never be able to compare ourselves to them. That being said, the situation is probably even more dire than you think, Dan, because the Espai Barça project doesn't only include the Camp Nou renovations, but they also include Estadio Johan Cruyff that has just been inaugurated this week. Yep. When the Juvenil A played the U19 Ajax team. And also they will have to destroy the current Palau Blaugrana, the basketball and handball arena, to build a brand new one. So it's going to get even more expensive than we expect. That being said, Coutinho is already out of our books because Bayern is paying his wages, and they have a purchase option of 120 million that they might take if the Brazilian performs well in the Bundesliga this season, and chances are that he will, because they're giving him the keys to the castle. He's going to be their playmaker. He's going to be basically their Messi, if I could say so. That being said, there are also rumors about Luis Suarez potentially getting an offer from David Beckham's Inter Miami, which will start their operations in 2020. So who knows? We might see Luis Suarez leave in the 2020 winter transfer window. And last but not least, I cannot imagine how we wouldn't try to get rid of Ousmane Dembélé at this point. And if there is a way to get Ousmane Dembélé to agree to go to Paris and to get PSG to accept Ousmane Dembélé as part of the payment to get Neymar to come to Barcelona. The Neymar transfer is something that is very controversial, but if there is a transfer that has been even more controversial in the past 2 years, it's that of Ousmane Dembélé, especially considering how the payoff has been so dissatisfying, probably even more dissatisfying than Coutinho, because Coutinho at least was disciplined, and you didn't hear stories about him not taking care of his body, and whenever he got injured, he always recovered fairly quickly. Ousmane Dembélé seems to be eating whatever, showing up late to practice, pretty much taking his spot on the team for granted. He gets injured, he doesn't even tell the staff, and he trains anyway, worsening his condition. So I think that at this point it would be trading a problem for a problem, plus maybe a few tens of millions of euros if that's what's needed. But the best candidate for me would be Ousmane Dembélé, and then everything else that happens may or may not happen. But at this point, I'm pretty sure that that's what our board is focusing on.
Yeah, I mean, I see. Part of me, I mean, and people have this on record for the last few shows with me, where even before Dembélé, it was before Dembélé got hurt, where Princess and I kind of had that discussion about whether we'd want Neymar back or whether I'd want to keep Dembélé in that situation. And part of me agrees with you, and then the other part that doesn't agree is that it's not necessarily even about Neymar, but it's about what's going to be required to get Neymar to Barcelona. Clearly, we're seeing not only with the funds, but if it is Dembélé, I want to say that even a few weeks ago, right? Let's say he doesn't get hurt in this situation. So much of this conversation, I think, doesn't happen. Remember, I mean, the player we were just weeks and months ago were complaining about all season long was, yes, there's that Rakitic contingent that seems to hate Rakitic on the internet, but Coutinho was the one that fans universally agreed just didn't fit at Barcelona, right? And now that he's out of sight, out of mind, he's over at Bayern, there has to be another player to have some kind of ire. So I just, not to say that I'm being a little bit of a conspiracy theorist here, but I think that, the injury to Dembélé is real. And whether he had missed the medical and he is being fined by the club and disciplined by the club, and those things can all be true. But I think the timing of it couldn't be worse, as I tweeted out this a few weeks ago, that the timing of this for Dembélé could not be worse, because it seems like his character is being, and his performance on the field are being called into question, just as this savior is being, from Paris, is being goaded to come back to the club. Well, I mean, or he himself, being Neymar, is pleading to come back to the club, and that's all coinciding in just a terrible bit of timing. And so the one thing I would say is every little bit of negative thing that I read about Dembélé, I take with a grain of salt, because again, the more slander and the more negativity that can be heaped on this player, anything to force him out of the club in a soft exit away from the club is something I think that the club is happy about, that everyone kind of supports. And now the fan base, I've seen it, have been won over to the fact that, Neymar has to be the hero. He's much more talented than Dembélé. He's the one that Barca need now. And you worry about losing Dembélé later, and who cares? He hasn't been good enough. And I think that just warps the line to fit the current narrative. And I think even I was telling someone today that I was just almost sad about the concept, and this is a question that Ira actually put in the group that I want to mention as well today, where Ira asked about the defense, that if Todibo or Jean-Claude Todibo is indeed involved in the Neymar negotiations, then Barca, in theory, have two center backs and a sometimes injured Umtiti, who might not be entirely happy with his role as well. We saw with this recent France team that Lenglet is called up, and Umtiti, because he doesn't really get a game and isn't fully in form, is not getting looks on the French national team at the moment. So with all that said, if Todibo is the one on his way out, what about all these fans who are saying, well, it doesn't matter. Todibo, anything to get Neymar back that's not named Messi has got to be part of this deal now, right? That's how desperate I think the board has become. That's how desperate Kool-Aids have become. And then for even a guy like Todibo, that Barcelona, it seemed to be this steal. He seemed to be this guy that, again, it kind of won me over because he's a dribbly center back that can make up space that Lenglet and Piqué doesn't. He just adds a different dimension. And I think that in two years' time, he's going to be a starter. I really do. I believe in this young player that I've seen just even a sample size, and I think the Barcelona did as well. What changed their mind that Todibo wasn't someone to try to build around, or that he's just this piece that they need to throw in to a team in PSG that already has so many center backs? I don't have an answer to that other than for all those people that say that, fine, Todibo doesn't matter, throw him in, whatever it takes to get Neymar. Well, I guess you guys should start watching Barca B and start checking out Ronald Araujo, because Chumi and Jorge Cuenca and all the ones that we've talked about in the past don't seem to even be highly rated for Barca B. It seemed to be Ronald Araujo who went on the first team preseason. Doesn't seem entirely ready the first team, but he might be the fourth center back if that's what's required. So I just think, for me, my thing that as you know, Mike, I prioritize squad building and squad depth, and just having a thing that fits all together with all 25 guys making sense. And it doesn't make sense in my brain, and I think I'm going crazy. So, Mike, please talk some sense into everybody that instead of just rambling my nonsense.
Well, first of all, I don't think that it would be a good idea at all to include any of our center backs on that deal if it were to happen. Obviously, if there is a position where we have a lot of depth, it's that of it's on the front line, right? We have a few extra midfielders maybe, but none that I would be comfortable giving away, except maybe for Ivan Rakitic, considering that we've gotten probably everything that there was to get out of him. And if he's going to give you one more good year, maybe he will, maybe he won't. Personally, I think that the good move would have been to sell him at his highest point right after the World Cup last year. But he's one of those names that you hear a lot whenever we hear about that potential deal. That being said, going back to Dembélé, the reason why most people, including myself, believe that he would be the ideal piece to that deal is because we probably shouldn't have bought him in the first place. He was a panic buy to replace Neymar. Then he got injured. Then we made another panic buy to replace Neymar by the name of Philippe Coutinho, and a few injuries and a loan to Bayern later. And now we're about to basically buy Neymar to replace Neymar. That's exactly what the board is doing. We've been panicking for 2 years, and we made two panic buys at the amount in the combined amount of 310 million euros, and now we're about to sell one in exactly a year from now for 120 out of the 160 that we got him for. And Dembélé, we got him for 147, and now we might even have to throw some extra money on top of him to get Neymar back. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not sure how I feel about the Neymar deal myself. I would do it if the price is right, obviously, and I wouldn't break the bank or get an extra loan to get him back. That being said, and we all know how this board works. Not only just this board, but unfortunately the constitution of FC Barcelona, which is basically a cooperative. It's not an LLC. It's not a company with an owner or a group of investors. FC Barcelona belongs to its socios, right? So we have to elect a board of directors once every 6 years, and that board of directors oversees every day-to-day operation, makes all the decisions, and their decisions are only focused on their 6-year cycle. And they don't know if they're going to come back after the 2021 elections. So why would they bother worrying about what's going to happen after 2021? If they could, in the best possible case scenario, if they could win the Champions League this year and next year and then show up at the elections, then they'll have another 6-year cycle to worry about. But for now, their next election is far from one, and they have to do whatever it takes to get immediate results. And if it means that they have to go after arguably one of the top 3, let's call it top 5 best players in the world, certainly one of the best players that this club has ever seen, if bringing him back could translate itself into immediate results, something that we haven't really seen with Dembélé, even though he won two straight La Ligas with him in the roster. It's not like he's been a a key part of these titles. Add to that the 2 straight remontadas that we suffered in the Champions League. Maybe if we get Neymar back, the results are going to be better. Maybe it's going to be La Liga plus a European Cup this time around. Who knows? But one thing's for sure, we're not exactly talking about a player that came out of La Masia and is an undisputed starter in this squad and has brought us so many memories and so many positive results. He's still a project and he's still rough. He's not a finished player, despite his price tag, despite the opportunities that he's gotten. And personally, I obviously, if it's player for player, I would do it in a heartbeat. Now, when I hear reports about PSG wanting an extra 180 million euros, I think that it's completely insane. When I hear that Barcelona offered 100 extra million on top of Dembélé, I think that it's absolutely insane. But player for player, I don't see why we wouldn't do it. How do you feel about that, Dan? I know that you have mixed feelings about this deal, but Dembélé for Neymar, don't you think that it would be a fair deal?
Well, I mean, I would say what I will agree about Dembélé is that, this is all hindsight, but again, I was willing to die on that mountain that when he was at Dortmund, he was a player that would have fit at Barcelona, and I was pleased with the deal when it happened. But now in hindsight, whether it might be off the field things, but even on the field, he came to Barca too soon, and unfortunately that, as again, to plug the YouTube video again, when you look at all these young phenoms, and they were all under the age of 18, the guys I talk about in that video, but even guys that are under the age of 22, if they're not brought along slowly and that in a way that fits their development, then it's just not going to work out, and that's what it seems to be with Dembélé, unfortunately. When it comes to the Neymar deal, though, again, the very nature of the deal, and yes, it might be about, if the Socis want something and the captain of the club, being Lionel Messi, want a certain thing, then who am I, as the host of the Barcelona podcast, to argue about what the will of the club, what the will of the fans, the best fans, and the ones who take care of the club financially, and Lionel Messi? Who am I to say that they don't have the best interests of the club in heart? You know what I mean? So I think, now that I'm going to walk back about what I feel about Neymar coming, but I saw some toxic stuff online that was saying that, if Neymar does come, with all those who were against the Neymar signing or Neymar coming back, will they then not celebrate a Champions League trophy if he delivers one, and all these different things? But that's not true at all. If he puts back that jersey on, and again, if Messi and Socios and everybody else involved in the club and PK and the whole locker room, if he is a Barcelona player and is supported as such, and I'm someone who's willing to forgive as well. So I guess that's what those of us who might not be too happy about it. And again, for me, it's not even about what he did so much. I think understanding, again, I work not just in this sport, but I work in a lot of different sports, and I can tell you that it might not have been that way in the 30s and 40s. And again, I always seem to find a way to bring up the NBA every show. But there's always that the anecdotes about Larry Bird and Irving Magic Johnson between the Lakers and the Celtics back in the 80s. And this concept that if anyone ever switched teams to their rivals and things like that, and if you played on a team, like that was your team, and there was this just a connection to teams that drafted you, and I know it's a little different with football, obviously, because you're brought in those academies. But there was this loyalty that was present that for football, and I think for Barcelona in particular, you go through, and there's a lot of different players who've played for Real Madrid and Barcelona. Even one of the great Barcelona players ever, Josep Samitier. He wasn't a big fan of Barca as he left, and he helped Real Madrid in their best of their years. But yet he's seen obviously in great light. But Luis Figo, because of the way he did it and because of how it all went down, and because he went back on his word, it has soured him in ways that are that he's still hated in ways that so many other players aren't. And all that said, what that means about Neymar is I don't know. Is that Neymar is a star that fits the era that we're living in, and that era is one where there is less loyalty towards your club, and it is more about not only individual brands. And Neymar, you said top 5 player, but he probably is the number 3 brand behind Messi and Ronaldo. It's not close, right? Those are the top big 3 brands in football. It's not Mbappe. It's not any player on Liverpool, right? It's Messi, it's Ronaldo, it's Neymar. Who's selling jerseys? Who's bringing in all that? For all the 100 million that Barca might be giving extra to PSG, they might be getting back more than that in marketing and marketing opportunities, and not just jersey sales, but just all that Neymar encompasses. So yes, it still makes me uncomfortable because of all that. And I think what it comes down to for me, I'm going to do that by answering a question from Minor as well. How do you see Carlos Perez's development with the first team, with the possibility that Neymar is back? And my answer is, again, that Dembélé, he asked about Dembélé as well. Well, Dembélé is out of the club. If Neymar comes, it's not even if he's involved in the Neymar deal. We might have to wait till January, but I mean, it's over for Dembélé. He's got to find somewhere else because he's never going to get a game, and he's never going to be able to develop as a young player. So it's not going to work for his career, and it's going to be best for him to leave. But then everybody else, whether it's Ansu Fati, he's just 16, so you might not even see him again for 2 more years, and yet he's still 18, and that's great. But for Carlos Perez, who's 21 years old, this might be the end that you see of Perez. And that's not a big deal because, yeah, is Carlos Perez going to be the person that wins the Champions League trophy for you? No, it's Neymar. But again, Mike, this is weird thing that I think it's this dogmatic approach I think I unfortunately have, that I try to always think 4 or 5 years ahead instead of just living in the now. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe that's what I have to do emotionally. I'm just going to have to live in the now and just try to appreciate what an attack force of Griezmann, Neymar, Messi, and Suarez is going to mean. I just think that I'm not going to have to, I can't worry about the development of Carlos Perez anymore because he's just going to play Copa del Rey. That's it. That's how every guy in the peripheral is going to be.
But you saw the game, right? How did you feel about the way Carlos Perez played? Because let's not kid ourselves. If he hadn't scored that goal, we would have remembered him completely differently. The way he controlled the ball, his dribbles, the way he missed sitters, easy shots to make. He didn't really look like a product of La Masia. Now you're gonna tell me he started the game at Camp Nou, season opener. Maybe he felt extra pressure that he doesn't usually feel, especially when he represents La Rojita or Barca B. But he didn't exactly look like a crack to me. You know, he might be a very good player at his level right now. But you know, if I had to choose between Carlos Perez or you know, a high profile name like Neymar, like Dembélé, or like Suarez, obviously there's no conversation to be had.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, what I enjoyed about Carlos Perez, and again, is this what wins trophies? No, but this is what makes me enjoy a half, is that just at his age and being from La Masia, what I did see from him with in that match against Real Betis is that his movement and the way that he went out on the touchline, and again, that's the big problem, that Messi, Neymar, Griezmann, and Suarez all kind of operate in the middle of the field, and they are heroes who Suarez does play off Messi, but they are all pretty much their best with the ball at their feet and working in the middle of the field in that space right around the 18-yard box. And Perez is just, again, one of those role players. And everyone, obviously 1,000 people said that he was just like Pedro in that he was very unselfish. He was willing to make that run up over the top. And even though he very rarely got the ball in that situation, it just opens up space for your teammates. And over the course of 90 minutes, all those different pockets of space, eventually there's an opening that's coming. And so he's a guy that added width. And that's what I think the La Masia part of it. It wasn't necessarily the interchanges. I think you're right. As I've said, I think he is not as much of he's not enough of a game breaker as in a front three for Barcelona to play for their first team. But he's certainly very much good enough to be a first team professional somewhere in the Liga. Whether it's, you know, at a Leganés or maybe it's at a Real Sociedad level. I'm not sure what that is. But yeah, I think for Carlos Perez, I think we see someone who's good enough to be in the Liga and probably good enough to be the 24th, 25th player in Barca's lineup or roster. But again, if a guy like Neymar is coming, then, you know, it's we can't live or die by the development of Carlos Perez. Now, again, when you talk about someone like Ansu Fati, though, who's only 16, who you can stash away for a little while, I hope that his trajectory by the time he's, you know, 20 years old, which is still 4 years from now. We're talking the post-Messi era when Fati is still 2, 3, 4, 5 years away from his prime. So he's a guy that, you know, I earmark a little differently, that I don't push him into the first team. I'm not going to even overanalyze what he did. The fact that he was on the field is exciting enough, you know, because we just don't need more overhyping of teenagers. We just see that clearly the board and they all care about him because, you know, as I just spoke about with Navid, they're willing to pay for it. But anyway, let's wrap this show up, Mike, with a question from Rick. And I do thank all of our in our Facebook group, our listener questions that we got. Again, we didn't get to all of them simply because this week was a little disjointed. It wound up being that I, for a lot of different reasons, we couldn't record until the day after I asked you the question. So a lot of those questions even became a little obsolete with the Neymar news. So we were going to end with a question from Rick. And you mentioned, I watched this game, the Juvenile Oz against the Ajax U19s, and it wasn't necessarily a great performance from the U19s. I was excited by ES Maribo, who Navid and I also talked about, and it was basically the first time that any of us really got to see a full match with Victor Valdez. It was on the Barcelona website, so it was exciting to see. But as I said, I tweeted that day, it's this weird thing that I was seeing where everybody's kind of looking at Twitter. You could even see it almost in the stadium. People are looking on Twitter about the Neymar news and just waiting for updates and anything involved when, Johan Cruyff is, this new stadium is being put out in his honor. The two clubs that he, basically built the modern incarnations of, commemorating this late legend. And so Rick asked, if Johan was still alive today, how do you guys think he would critique the club at its moment, at the current moment, the current management and board? And I mean, that one's pretty much a give me. We know how he would feel about Bartomeu and the board at the moment, and their transfer policy. And do you think he would be, what if anything he said was positive, what would that be? Or do you think he would just be outright critical? Or do you think he would even have a relationship with the club at this moment?
First of all, that's an amazing question.
Rick has many questions. I want to always say that. Like, no offense to anybody else who gives us questions, but Rick has been with us since the day one, 2017. And Rick's questions, he's always been an MVP. I just want to say that. Thank you to Rick. You're absolutely right, Mike.
Johan Cruyff is my hero, right? I love FC Barcelona thanks to Johan Cruyff. He's the first manager I have ever seen. I studied everything regarding his philosophy, and he's a man that I've always looked up to. And if you want to know how he would feel about the transfer policy, look no further than how he felt about the Neymar transfer in 2013. He was very, very, very much against it, and he was extremely vocal about it too. And there is an avalanche of quotes that you can find online still to this day. Johan Cruyff always preferred to develop talent from within, from La Masia. He was actually instrumental in developing La Masia and make it what it has become today. Obviously, it was inaugurated by Rinus Michels, but he played a key role in the development of La Masia. And even as a manager, the way he managed his team during the days of the Dream Team, between 88 and 96, a lot of opportunities were given to youngsters. One that comes to mind is a youngster by the name of Pep Guardiola, who was only 17 years old in 1990, and that's just one out of many. And right now, the way that it's happening, unfortunately in Barcelona, we're adopting the Galacticos policy, right? We're getting involved in that rat race twice a year now. Every transfer window, we're trying to make a big money splash. And, even when Barca was bad, right? Like, I'm talking about the early 2000s, when we were winning absolutely no trophy for 5 straight years, we still had a decent team on the field. We had Luis Enrique, we had Patrick Kluivert, we had Rivaldo even, and people were just happy to see beautiful football. And even though the results didn't come, we were still behind our team. But now, again, it's that culture of trying to make a big splash and win it all every single year. It's like winning the treble in 2009 was the biggest of all curses for us, because now we expect it every single year. And presidents come and go every 6 years, whereas during the days of the Dream Team, and before and after, we had the same president for 25 years, which brought stability, which brought a tradition of long-term goals and continuity. Whereas now it's like all or nothing twice a year. And I remember back in those days when you bought a player for 20 million and he flopped, it was the end of the world. Now we buy players for 150 or 160 million euros, and we get rid of them like a year and a half, 2 years later, and then we want to make the next big money transfer for a nominal value, money plus players of over 200 million, which is exactly what we got for him 2 years ago. So of course it's the exact opposite of the Johan Cruyff philosophy. And when I say Johan Cruyff, I don't mean Johan Laporta. I really mean Johan Cruyff, because Johan Laporta really spent money when he was the president of Barca. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, and you go back to even Cruyff's days as manager. If he didn't like certain players, they were out, and I mean, and that's how it worked. I mean, players that were beloved by the club were just not in his plans, and it worked out the same way when he was a manager.
Romario is a good example of that.
Yep. So, and I think, Mike, you made a great point that what it comes down to, I think, with this whole, we'll call it Neymar saga, is that having just had to go through the Frankie de Jong saga, and then the Coutinho saga before that, and then it was Neymar leaving and the saga before that, and it seems like you're right. It is almost transfer window fatigue, and for me, we do a show every week, and that's what it is. Throughout these summers, it really is a fight. And for me, I've seen a lot of people talk about this too. By the time you have this, maybe by the time you have this in your ears, the transfer window's over. But by the time this show you hear next week's show, the transfer window will be over. And I think what it comes down to is I'm just excited to watch FC Barcelona play this season, and I will support whoever's on the team. So we'll see exactly who's on the team in the next few days. But thank you, all you listeners, for being on our team throughout this entire show. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to both Navid and Mike for helping me out with this one. And thanks again for you tuning in. You can tap in your app and check out the show notes to subscribe to the show. You can also find us on social media too. We're on Twitter at the Barcelona Pod, or at HiltonD13 for me, and on Instagram at the Barcelona Pod. Our closed Facebook group is TBPod154/group. Deeper dive discussions, and you can help us out on Patreon to continue making these shows and hear the quick take match reviews. If you want to hear what I thought about Real Betis and what I hear about every episode, that's me for about 15-20 minutes. And thanks to all of our new Patreons since the season started. I really, really appreciate it, and it goes a really long way. We're also on YouTube now at the Barcelona Podcast. Check us out and hit that subscription button. And finally, I do want to say, if you do leave an iTunes review, I do read those. And as you notice, I said that we are going to the break, and I gave a warning because somebody let me know. So I would love some 5 stars. You give me 5 stars, also give me a little feedback. And again, I just am trying to make the show better that way as well. So that is another option. So thanks so much for listening to the Barcelona Podcast. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon, and Forza Barca.
Forza.